Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to do a review now of the Zack Synder Cut trailer that debuted recently on the DC Fandom online event. As you all know by now, this is the original version of the Zack Synder Justice League before it was updated and changed by Joss Whedon back in 2017. Prior to this event, Zack Synder also released that the Justice League Synder Cut will be released in 4 one-hour episodes on HBO Max. There will be a later intention to release it afterwards in a complete 4-hour version. I think, to be honest, most fans would rather watch it in, rather than the 1-hour segments, they'd rather watch it in a whole complete version. But we understand, of course, that this is primarily designed for the streaming service to help promote and attract more subscribers. So we're just going to talk over really now the new footage. I've already talked about what I perceive or what I think about the DCEU, its interpretation of the Justice League characters, my views on the Snyderverse and how he's handled overall the DC cinematic universe, its flaws, how I think it's short-changed the DC heroes in the long run. So I'm not going to go into the context there. What I will do is provide links of the Synder Cut videos that I did. They're quite extensive, but I've broken down into detail my thoughts on the whole Snyderverse, and I'll put them in the links below for you to read at a later date. So during this review, we're going to go into just primarily the new scenes and the new footage that we haven't seen yet, because this trailer merged together new footage with, of course, footage that we previously had seen already within the movie. So there's quite a lot to go through on here. Overall, I thought the trailer was quite interesting. There are a lot of elements that I'm quite interested in to see how they'll play out, how they'll develop, how they'll merge into what we would assume will be a much more of a cohesive and a much more consistent story and movie overall. We noticed straight away that Zack Synder uses the same song Hallelujah, which is by Leonard Cohen, that he used also in The Watchmen. I think it was a scene between the Owlman and the Silver Spectre, I believe, 3/4 of the way through the movie, and he uses the same scene here. So not a bad choice. I think it works quite well within the trailer. So we are now going to go over all the interesting parts. For me, what I felt has got me most excited to at least see the finished version and how they'll play out. So the first scene we open up with is the opening image of Darkseid. Now, of course, this is something that fans have been highly anticipating to see for a long time. We recently seen how Thanos was represented in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so Darkseid is essentially the equivalent of Thanos, and for a long time we've been waiting to see how that character will be visualized in live action. So looking at this live shot here, and I have to be honest, I'm not really convinced by it. I don't think it's a finished shot. I mean, it's something that, yes, I think they had to present together because Zack Synder and Warner Brothers knew that this is something that fans wanted to see, so they needed to show it, but I don't think it's quite a finished shot, and it's not a very convincing shot. What we have to bear in mind is, I think this is Darkseid in his earlier form, if you like, before he becomes the actual fully formed Darkseid that we normally see from the Justice League Unlimited cartoons and the DC animated movies and the comic book interpretation as well. So if you knew your DC Comics and your DC Comics mythology, you'll know that this is Prince Usax, I think that's how you pronounce the name, how he was originally before he came into the anti-life equation, which, as you all know, is the burning motivation behind Darkseid. He wants to obtain the anti-life equation so he can assume all control over the universe. So again, if you link back to the Justice League movie, which I assume if you're watching this you all have seen that movie, we had that opening prologue sequence where we had the original war, where we saw the Atlanteans and the Themyscians all involved in this huge amount of battle, along with the Green Lanterns as well, I believe, against the invasion from the people from Apocalypse. So in the original version we saw Steppenwolf leading the charge. So now in this Zack Synder edited version, now that we see Darkseid on here, so I'm not completely convinced on here. He's lifting his axe and he's striking it down, so I assume in whoever's involved in the battle on here, he's striking the final blow. Maybe that would again be the opening prologue sequence for the movie perhaps, but for now I just wasn't overly convinced by this rendition. You have to bear in mind that they're still working on it, so I fully expect when we see the completed version that this shot will look a lot better and a lot more fully rendered. We go on to the next part, and for me this is one of the more interesting elements, and that is the Superman scene here, where we see him now being what I think is a fully resurrection scene. If you go back to the Batman vs Superman movie, you know the climatic scene where Superman dies battling Doomsday, of course, and then we follow that storyline from the Justice League where Superman is resurrected and he fights the Justice League initially. So I think the scene here where we see Henry Cavill surrounded by all this electricity, it very much looks like it's the scene from Batman vs Superman where of course he's in his original red and blue costume. So if you know the overall history of the Snyder Cut, the initial plan was to have Superman resurrected and assumed under Darkseid's control, and he would be used to find the mother boxes and fight the Justice League. That was the original intended script for the Justice League. So that's what I think we're hinting at here, where we see Superman, he's resurrected by Darkseid, he goes and fights the Justice League, and then later on he breaks out of that control and then goes to assume the black suit and fight with the Justice League later on. So that's what I think this scene is encompassing on here. Again, we could be wrong and they may have changed their original plans for what they're going to do with Superman, but that's what I think we're seeing in this scene here. We're seeing the resurrection of Superman at his death scene of Doomsday, and that's where we see him fully assumed under the control. So it will be interesting how do they follow this through, because if you look at later on in the trailer, we still see Cyborg digging the grave, because if you remember from the Justice League movie, they dug up the dead body of Superman. A lot of fans didn't like that development. It was something that was a bit of bad taste. Are they still going to have that development? So how are we going to see that storyline transition from when Superman gets resurrected and then later on has his grave dug up? How are we going to see that story play out? So it'll be very interesting to see on that front. The next scene we see is the Nightmare Vision. This is a continuation from Batman vs Superman, of course, where we had that scene where Bruce Wayne has that vision of Darkseid seemingly taking over the planet, and then later on we see Batman getting captured and we see the Superman coming in later and assumingly killing Batman in that nightmare sequence before we see the Flash breaking through in time, which I'll mention later on. We go on to the next scene. Now we see Cyborg and the flashback scenes where we see him playing as an American footballer. Of course, we knew these scenes before when they promoted the movie, if you remember, for the Justice League. In the initial trailers, we did see these scenes of Cyborg as an American footballer, and these scenes were obviously edited out. So now with the Snyder Cut version, I'm pretty sure we are going to see now a lot more Cyborg involvement. There have been many quotes from interviews saying that Cyborg will be indeed the heart of this movie. We're going to see his origin, of course, and we see the scenes later on where we see his father's death following the experimentation with the mother box. That's the original origin that they're going through, particularly as well if you watch the animated movie Justice League War, where we saw initially Silas experimenting with the technology before Victor gets embroiled in the technology, the alien tech, and then that's how we see him formed to become Cyborg. So we're going to see that original take on it, and it looks a far better effect than what we saw initially from Batman vs Superman. If you remember, we had that scene where Diana was looking at the hard disk of information and tapping into all the PowerPoint presentation, if you remember, of the different characters when they all had their individual logos, and we saw that initial scene where we saw Cyborg being originally formed. So these effects looked a lot better, and if you see the way that Silas kind of disintegrates as the music's playing, the song Hallelujah is very reminiscent of Watchmen, that Zack Snyder typical style, that very blue bright hue effects that we see on it as Silas disintegrates. So that's their intent, to really make Cyborg the heartbeat and soul of this movie. We go on to the next scene now. Superman emerging forward as the black suit from the fortress, and I think this is the later development where we see now how he snaps out of the control, out of the influence of Darkseid. So we had that earlier scene where we see Lois looking up in the skyline and we see Superman floating high in the air amongst the buildings. So I think this is going to be after the scene, if you remember from the Justice League movie, where Superman initially fights all the Justice League members before going away. Now, of course, in that movie, the whole transition that Superman made from coming out of the darker influence and going back into the more heroic Superman, it was of course very disjointed. There wasn't a lot of follow through on that development. So that's what I would expect to see more of here. How does Superman break away from dark side influence and go ahead to fighting with the Justice League? He's obviously going into the fortress, so I expect to see some full-on sequence where he makes that transformation and we see the formation of the black suit. One thing I would say, I think when we see the latest shots in the trailer, of course, we're not going to get, presumably, the Superman in the red and blue suit, because if you remember, a lot of those Superman scenes that we had in the Joss Whedon versions were reshoots. The original plan was never to have Superman in the red and blue suit. It was always going to be Superman in the black suit. And I think the original plan was, if you remember, Justice League was going to be 2 movies, right? So I think part 1 was going to be Superman in the black suit, and then part 2 was going to be Superman eventually emerging back into the red suit. That's something we still could see, right? So we still could see in the first 2 hours of this Justice League, Superman fighting in the black suit, and then maybe in the concluding parts of the movie we reverting back to the red and blue suit. I hope so, because for me, obviously, Superman in the red and blue suit is something I always prefer rather than the black suit. But we will wait and see on that front. The next scene we have, where we see the Flash rescuing Iris West, and these were scenes much like the Cyborg scenes we'd already seen during the promotion of the Justice League movie. We have that slow motion scene and we see the blue lightning surrounding Barry as he rescues Iris from that flipping car and the explosion on here. So in the Snyder Cut, I'd expect us to see a lot more involvement of Iris West, how they meet together. Maybe we get 1 or 2 scenes of them together. Will they use the same actress in the Flashpoint movie? Maybe, maybe not. That we've had no casting details at all, aside from the Michael Keaton and the Ben Affleck involvement within the Flashpoint movie. So maybe they'll probably go for a different actress for that movie. But yeah, these are scenes we kind of knew already. Flash and the introduction to the Iris West. They cut that out of the Justice League movie. Again, I don't know why. That's something we should have seen. It would have given a much more development and much more context within the Barry Allen character. But again, that's what I expect to see a lot more within this Snyder version here. The next scene I want to touch on is the reveal of what I think is Desard. Anybody who doesn't know Desard, he's basically one of Darkseid's servants. He normally, if you look at the animated versions, he has a more of a purple cloak. When I first saw this shot, I thought it was an earlier version of Darkseid, but maybe it is Desard. It might be one of the two. He looks a bit bigger and a lot more bulkier for Desard. If you look at the animated versions, Desard is much more smaller in frame. So it may not be, it may just be another one of Darkseid minions. We'll wait and see. But that was a very interesting shot to see on here. We then go to the next scene where we see the emergence of Steppenwolf, and this is really a recreation of what we saw in the Justice League movie. We see the Amazonians, of course. That's where we saw Steppenwolf appear, where he wants to get one of the mother boxes because the Amazonians, of course, were protecting one of the mother boxes. And here we see that twirling shot, and we see now some amended effects because they're going for a different look of Steppenwolf. We all know how terrible the rendered version of Steppenwolf was in the original Justice League. We were promised a much more improved version for this Snyder Cut version, and I do have to say I'm not really that impressed. There wasn't really much more to gauge on regarding Steppenwolf on it. Maybe they're saving that for the future. Of course, we again have to bear in mind that they're not fully finished with this production, so they're going to add a lot more effects and make it a much more of an improvement. We all assume that. Zack Snyder did release some footage, an online picture of the amended version of Steppenwolf, and I have to say I wasn't really that impressed. It was a shot where I think they covered up a lot more of the face and they made it a lot more bigger and a lot more bulky, and it still really did impress me. Despite the kind of intricate design on there, it just didn't really appeal to me that much. And I honestly feel now the fact that we're going to get Darkseid's involvement in this movie you're kind of not as hyped as much to see what Steppenwolf is and what he looks like. So I think in this version he's going to take a lot more of a backseat as we see Darkseid a lot more involved in events. Another scene where we see the Batmobile in action as it's battling the parademons, and it's in a much more of an amended blue filter on here, which is much better visually, because if you remember, the original version was in the blue, and then in the Joss Whedon version they changed it to that red tinted filter, and that never really suited me. I never really understand why they changed that filter. It was a really kind of ugly aesthetic, and it never really merged well as we saw the Justice League fighting all the parademons and the aliens. It just never really worked for me, so it's good to see that they have that blue filter. It's much more better visually. We see a following shot where we see just a quick glimpse of Superman flying together against Steppenwolf, again where they're using that blue chrome like filler. It just looks a lot more better, it looks a lot more slick, it looks a lot more cool. So I expect to see these fight scenes with Superman a lot better. We go on to the next shot, and I think this is one of the coolest shots of the trailer, where we see Cyborg and it looks like he's controlling this massive amount of rockets or missiles, and he brings them down. It looks really cool. I think this is probably a dream sequence again, because they intend to make Cyborg the more heartbeat of the movie. I think we're going to get a lot more of Cyborg's nightmares or visions as he adjusts more to his more robotic form. We're going to see a lot more of an internal struggle as he struggles to get used to how he is now and reflects on how he used to be. So I think this is a dream sequence. He's bringing these rockets down, so maybe it's one of those where we get an insight into the angst and he wants to destroy the world around him, or get revenge, or destroy people around him. It's such a quickly edited shot, we don't really get to see the full context, but I think it's a nightmare sequence. We have that other shot again, it's very brief, where we see the crowd looking up the sky and we see one or two figures zooming across the sky. Again, people have remarked that maybe it's the Flash traveling in time. I'll remark about that more in a moment. We have another shot on here, nothing really particularly important, but for me, I'll just point it out. We see the shots of Batman blocking the energy waves from the parademons. For me, it's one of those ridiculous moments. Again, the fact that we've got to make Batman as powerful and as all-conquering as possible. As we all know, that's the never-ending mantra of the DC, to focus everything about Batman. I just think it's a ridiculous shot to have the fact that Batman can block these energies waves. He should be blown to bits. I'm probably just nitpicking, to be honest, but I just think it was a ridiculous shot on here. So going back to what I mentioned about the Flash, now this is a really interesting scene, I think, here, where we see him standing here and we see the background seemingly disorientating around him. Now this is the clearest indication that this is him probably tapping into the Speed Force. We of course know from Batman vs Superman that there is going to be some time travel element. If you go back to what they originally planned, the original vision was to have a follow-on from the nightmare sequence where Batman and Cyborg will be in the future and they build some sort of time travel device to enable Flash to go back in time and remind Batman of what's happening and help him to stop the future nightmare vision taking place. And of course we go back to that scene in Batman vs Superman where he's reaching out to Batman saying, too soon, you must find her, you were right about him, it was always about him. So probably referring to Superman again and how his death causes the events of that nightmarish future. So that's what the scene I think is playing to here, where we're seeing Barry. I think it's more of a discovery of time travel and how we can seemingly go back in time. We have that really, if you like, those embarrassing shots, laughable shots where he's running again. They just have never been able to capture fully the essence of the Flash running. I don't know why they failed. You think with all of these hundreds of millions of budget and the state-of-the-art CGI and effects, how they failed so badly in recreating the running effects of Flash. Say what you like about the CW verse, but they did it a lot better. The running sequences of the Flash, they did it a lot more convincingly in my eyes. And yeah, these scenes here we see Ezra Miller running, is literally, there's no coordination, literally like it's falling over. It never worked in the movie and unfortunately it still doesn't work here. But overall, yes, these scenes here, we're going to see some sort of time travel effect, of course, the origin of the time travel. Again, I'll go back to that scene where we saw the two people looking at the sky. Some people have free-framed it where they see it's two people on here, maybe it's two versions of the Flash running together in the Speed Force as the people are looking up in the air. I'm pretty sure we're going to get some tie-in to the hinted Flashpoint movie. As you all know, that's going to take place now, I think in 2022 now. It's going to feature, of course, the Michael Keaton version of Batman and the Ben Affleck version of Batman. It's going to adopt the Flashpoint storyline. I've already to refer to this in various other videos, which I will put in a link in the description below. As we all know, the Flashpoint storyline involves time travel elements, so I think we are going to see some sort of bridge in this Snyder Cut version here of Barry rediscovering or discovering for the first time time travel, and then we'll get some sort of hints of what we're going to see later on in the Flashpoint movie. So that's all fine, that's all good on here, not a problem. And then we get to the final scene where we see the group scene at the end. We see the Justice League members standing over the cliff top, all looking together, smiling on here. It's a really cool shot. I think it looks better than what we got in a Joss Whedon. Of course, this goes back to the original version where we don't see Superman in a red and blue suit in the Justice League Joss Whedon version. We see him here in the black suit version. They're all standing in line. A really cool shot as they're hovering over and they see the spaceship ready to pick them up on air. I think this is probably the end part of the first 2 hours. And then we'll get the next 2 hours where we see further developments, I think, as they fight Darkseid. Again, maybe we get more hints into the time travel, linking it to the Flashpoint movie. And then I'm pretty sure the concluding scenes, we will see Superman in the red and blue suit. But this concluding shot here, you know, it looks very cool. It's very good. Again, it links very well with the music, the Hallelujah song. It looks very good. So again, I think this is something where we're going to see a concluding part of the first 2 hours of the Justice League movie on here. All of them standing together after they beaten the Parademons to begin with. So this, I think, initially we will see them defeat Steppenwolf, defeat the Parademons. That's the end of part 1, and then we'll see Darkseid come together later on in part 2. But it's a very cool shot, and I can't doubt about it. It looks visually very good as well. So that's the concluding shot that we have on here. So overall, in terms of the trailer itself, like I said, it's a well put together trailer, considering the fact that they're still working on production. I imagine Zack Snyder is busy away in the editing room right now. Of course, they had to put something together for this DC fandom event because that's what a lot of people were really looking forward to and really invested in, along with the Matt Reeves Batman, of course. So from that perspective, I credit them that they put together this trailer. It looks very good, all in HD, very nice, very well put together. So as I said, overall, my previous videos about the Snyder Cut, I think it's something as a farewell present to the fans, of course, who have been lobbying for this version for 2 years, of course, along with the famous Release the Snyder Cut movement, and of course people who are fans of Zack Snyder's vision and his interpretation of the characters. Of course, this is designed to help attract more people and subscribers to the HBO streaming service. So from that forefront, yes, its trailer's done its job, and at the very least, I suppose, I'm interested just to see the kind of conclusion, if you like, of the Snyder Cut. What may have been, what we might have seen had this original version hit the theatres, and of course what would have been the Justice League Part 1 and the Justice League Part 2. So from my perspective, it's more of a curiosity. It's not something where I'm coming through, well, I'm really excited because this could have been what the Justice Cinematic Universe could have been for the DC characters. I've always stated, and I will continue to state, that I think this was a failed experimentation. I don't think it did justice to the DC heroes in terms of how they were interpreted and how they were presented, most notably in terms of Superman. But if you're going to do this for the streaming service and give the fans who like it what they want, then fair enough, and we'll just see how it plays out in the future, and then hopefully we can kind of bookend and close out the Zack Snyder universe, and then we can move forward with Matt Reeves' Batman. We will, of course, more than likely get a third movie of Wonder Woman, if I'm pretty sure the Wonder Woman 94 will be a continued success. We will of course get an Aquaman sequel, and they dropped hints and details of that in the DC fandom, along with the Shazam of course. We have got the Black Adam movie coming on later on, something I'm quite excited on about, and I may do some coverage on that as well. But I think if we can just bookend the Zack Snyder version with this Snyder Cut here, and then I think after that I don't want to see any more continuation of this. We say goodbye to Ben Affleck's version. More than likely I think we'll say goodbye to Henry Cavill's version. All this hype about maybe him appearing in the Black Adam version, I don't really care as much for that. I don't want to see Superman just jobbing around for other people and their movies. I want to see him in his own standalone versions. But I just think now we get this Snyder Cut version, we get some closure, a definitive conclusion to this, and then we move on and we press on further for the future, and hopefully we can start again, reboot the DC cinematic universe, and this time get it right, get Superman right, get Batman right, and move on from there. So those are my overall thoughts on the Snyder Cut and the extended version and footage that we got on here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Are you even more hyped up and excited for it now? Or after this footage, are you less excited? Are you less hyped for it now? And are you like me, just want to see now this whole Snyder Cut, just draw a line under it now, and let's press on to the future and rebuild this DC cinematic universe going ahead? So those are my thoughts on the Snyder Cut trailer. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.